The universe tore open with a shriek of reality itself, a violent rip in the fabric of space. I watched on the main viewer, my hands frozen above the console, as Dr. Elara Vance's research vessel was torn apart by gravitational shears we never predicted. Her voice, strained and crackling with interference, cut through the chaos on the bridge. "It's not a collapse. Do you hear me? The readings are all wrong. The star isn't dying. It's a gateway." Static hissed, swallowing her next words. Then her signal flared one last time. I'm falling through, and then nothing. Just the dead hum of empty comms and the horrified silence of her team. We all stood there, staring at the void where she had been, knowing that everything we understood about physics had just been rewritten. And that silence became our mission. We had to follow. We had to find out what lay on the other side of that star. Commander Kael didn't run. In the vacuum of command, every second stretches into an eternity of consequence. His movement from the bridge to the observation deck was a controlled, deliberate storm, each step charged with the weight of a life lost and a universe broken. The star on the main viewer was no longer a celestial body. It was a wound, a pulsating vortex of violet and gold energy that churned against the laws of physics. It didn't burn, it seethed, and in its chaotic heart he swore he could still see the ghost of Elara's ship, a fleeting afterimage seared into reality by the violence of its passing. His hands, steady now, gripped the railing. "Helm, plot an immediate trajectory through that energy field. Full power to the forward shields. We are going after her." The order wasn't a request, it was a declaration of war against the impossible. The ship groaned in response, a deep metallic protest that vibrated through the deck plates. As we pushed toward the shimmering boundary of the anomaly, our systems didn't just fail, they betrayed us. Control panels flickered, not with the familiar red of a critical alert, but with scripts of glowing, unknown symbols that crawled across the screens like living things. The artificial gravity pulsed, dropping away and surging back in nauseating waves. It wasn't a system crash, it was a conversion. The star's unique radiation was a language, and it was speaking to our ship, rewriting our code, our very hardware, into something new and unrecognizable. Alarms that had been blaring moments before fell silent, not because the danger had passed, but because the systems that monitored danger no longer understood the concept. In that sudden, eerie quiet, a new sound filtered through the comm system. It was a whisper, a fragile thread of audio woven through the static. At first, it was just noise, but then it resolved, crystalline and impossible. Elara's voice, not the strained, frantic shout from before the collapse, but a calm, measured whisper, as if she was speaking from just beside you, and she wasn't calling for help. She was reciting a sequence, a string of numbers and symbols that made no sense within any known astrometric chart. They were coordinates, but they pointed to a location that every star map declared was empty void. A place that, by every law of nature and science, simply should not exist. The whisper ended as softly as it began, leaving us with a choice written in starlight and static: trust the ghost in the machine or turn back from the unknown. The transition from warp was unlike any we had ever experienced. There was no gradual deceleration, no gentle return to the quiet hum of sublight engines. One moment we were a streak of light hurtling through the cosmos, and the next we were simply still. The violent shudder of the anomaly was gone, replaced by an impossible, profound silence. And there it was, hanging in the void before us. Not the cold, empty space the ghostly coordinates had promised, but a breathtaking crystalline nebula. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, its structure a vast geometric lattice of what looked like solidified energy, a cathedral built by stars, and cutting through that heavy silence, stronger and clearer than ever before, was the beacon of Elara's personal comm signal. It was no longer a whisper. It was a steady, constant pulse, a homing call from the very heart of the impossible structure. Commander Kael was at his station before the view screen had even finished resolving the image. His face, usually a mask of stoic command, was etched with a raw intensity I had never seen. He didn't hesitate. His fingers flew across the console, slamming the channel open with a force that echoed through the quiet bridge. Elara, Vance, this is Commander Kael of the starship Resolute. Report your status immediately. The silence that followed his demand was agonizing, a void that seemed to swallow his words. For a heartbeat, there was only the soft hum of the ship and the eerie light of the nebula. Then a crackle of static and her voice returned to us. It was her, but it wasn't. The distortion was still there, a faint echo as if she was speaking to us from the bottom of a deep, gravity-rich ocean. But beneath the static, her tone was utterly transformed. The fear, the desperation from her final moments at the star were gone. In their place was a kind of serene, overwhelming awe. Kael. Her voice sighed through the speakers. I passed through the star. We were all wrong. It wasn't a death, it was a birth, a passage into something so much greater. There was a reverence in her words that felt alien, unsettling. A scientist like Elara dealt in data and facts, not in spiritual epiphanies. Before Kael could demand clarification, her voice sharpened, the awe suddenly edged with a new, urgent tension. You need to see this for yourselves. The structure, it's a key, it's a map and a lock all at once, but you have to hurry. A new kind of static, sharper and more aggressive, began to bleed into her transmission. Her next words were almost lost in the rising interference, a frantic warning that chilled me to the bone. They've detected the resonance of your arrival. They're coming. And just like that, the channel died, leaving us with a choice more terrifying than the void itself. Step into the beautiful, unknown cradle she described, or prepare for a confrontation with an unseen that she was clearly desperate to avoid. Alien vessels surged from the crystalline lattice of the nebula, their forms a breathtaking violation of known engineering. They moved not like ships but like living things, shimmering carapaces of light reflecting the nebula's internal pulse, their structures flowing and reconfiguring in a silent, beautiful dance. There was no roar of engines, only an eerie, graceful glide that was somehow more terrifying than any battle fleet. They didn't hail us. Their only communication was a volley of radiant energy that lanced past our bow, a precise and unmistakable warning shot that illuminated our shields in a cascade of violet sparks. On the bridge, the tension snapped from awe to immediate survival. Evasive pattern Delta, Kael's voice was a blade cutting through the stunned silence. Weapons stand by target their lead vessel. His fingers were already hovering over the armament controls, every instinct of a commander bred for conflict, ready to meet the threat. Then her voice cut through the chaos, clear and sharp with a desperation we hadn't heard since the star. Kael, no, stand down your weapons. Elara's transmission was clean now, devoid of the earlier static, laced with an urgency that commanded absolute attention. They are not your enemy, they're sentinels, guardians of the threshold. If you fire a single shot, you will never understand what this place is. You will only confirm their belief that we are barbarians crashing through a sacred gate. Her words painted a picture we couldn't have imagined. This wasn't a military defense, it was a spiritual protection. The beautiful, organic ships weren't attacking, they were herding, guiding, their warning shots a test of our intent rather than a declaration of war. A new set of coordinates flashed onto our main navigational screen, transmitted directly from her beacon. They didn't point to an empty sector, but deeper into the heart of the glowing crystalline structure. Follow my signal, Elara insisted, her tone softening from a warning into a plea. I know it defies every protocol, every tactical doctrine you have. But you have to trust me. Come to the rendezvous point and I will explain everything. The choice before Commander Kael was no longer a simple tactical decision. It was a profound test of faith. To fight was to embrace the familiar, the known logic of confrontation. To follow was to surrender to the unknown, to accept that the rules of reality itself had changed the moment we passed through the star. We watched him, the entire bridge crew holding its breath, waiting for the order that would define our entire mission. His hand, which had been poised to unleash our full arsenal, slowly pulled back from the console. His eyes remained locked on the viewer, on the serene, predatory grace of the guardian vessels as they circled us. He saw what we all saw now. The patterns in their movement weren't attack formations. They were a procession, an escort. "Helm," he said, his voice low and utterly changed. "Plot a course to the new coordinates, all power to structural integrity, but stand down all offensive systems. We are going to follow them." The order was a seismic shift, a crack in the foundation of everything we knew. As our ship turned and began to glide alongside the shimmering guardians, moving deeper into the nebula's luminous embrace, we weren't just traveling to a new location. We were surrendering to a new set of rules and placing our fate entirely in the hands of the woman we thought we had lost. The ship settled with a whisper onto a surface that seemed to sing beneath the landing struts. This was no ordinary world. The very air hummed with a low, resonant frequency, and every sound we made, the hiss of a hatch opening, the scuff of a boot on the strange, glassy ground, rippled outward in visible waves. Sound didn't just travel here, it manifested. A footstep would leave a faint, shimmering echo of itself hovering in the air for a moment before fading. A spoken word would bloom into a brief, intricate sculpture of light and vibration. We had entered a realm where noise was a physical architect, building and unbuilding reality with every vibration. And then she built herself. The ambient hum of the planet coalesced before us, particles of light and resonating energy drawing together like iron filings to a magnet. They wove the familiar lines of her face, the fall of her hair, the confident posture we all remembered. It was Elara, but she was made of music and memory, a holographic projection sculpted from the very song of this impossible world. She was both there and not there, a phantom of profound beauty and unsettling fragility. Her voice, when it came, was not from a speaker but from the air itself, a symphony translated into words. "You came," she said, and her form pulsed gently with the words, "I knew you would. I had to make you understand, Kael. The star wasn't a catastrophic collapse. It was a door, a transit point engineered to bridge our universe with this one, a deeper layer of the multiverse most civilizations never even glimpse." She gestured with a hand that dissolved into shimmering motes of light and then reformed. "I didn't fall, I was retrieved, pulled through with a purpose. This place, this echo planet, it's a way station, a place of communication for those who exist between the vibrational states of reality." The awe in her voice was tempered now with a grim urgency, but the transit is breaking down, the entity that maintains the balance between these layers. It's trapped, it's caught in the dimensional interface, and its anguish is reverberating back through the transit points, through the stars themselves. Her luminous eyes fixed on Kael, the projection flickering with the intensity of her message. The dying stars in our universe weren't natural celestial events. They were anchors, each one a tether point holding this wounded, multidimensional being in place, causing it unimaginable pain and threatening to tear both of our realities apart. We were sent to investigate a stellar anomaly, but we were really being drawn to a universal triage signal. "We are not explorers here, Kael. We are paramedics for all of existence." The ground beneath our feet did not simply shake. It contracted, a sharp, convulsive spasm that was less an earthquake and more a pained shudder, as if the entire planet had taken a sudden, agonized breath. The crystalline structures around us flared with a pained, violent light, and the very air, once resonant with music, now screamed with a discordant, tearing frequency. It was a physical assault on the senses, a wave of pure distress that washed over us. And then, cutting through the chaos, a voice spoke. It did not come from Elara's luminous projection, nor did it echo in the air. It manifested directly within the confines of our own minds, a thought that was not our own, vast and ancient and heavy with a grief so profound it felt like staring into an infinite abyss. I am the weaver of realities. The words were not sound, but a cascade of images and sensations. We saw the shimmering threads of cosmic energy, the tapestry of space-time itself being woven on a loom of impossible scale. Each thread a star, a nebula, an entire galaxy being gently guided into its place in the grand design. We felt the careful, loving intention behind it all, a consciousness so vast its only purpose was the beautiful, intricate act of creation. Then the vision shifted and the grief slammed into us. We saw the loom broken, the shimmering threads were snapping one by one, each break a cataclysmic flash of pain. A supernova here, a collapsing star there. Each wasn't a random celestial death, but a scream of agony echoing across dimensions. "And I am dying," the voice continued, the sorrow so immense it was a physical weight in our chests. Each collapsing star you documented was not a natural end. It was a thread pulled taut and severed, an anchor point failing. I am caught, suspended between the vibrational layers I was meant to harmonize. My pain reverberates back through the fabric, and each reverberation becomes another tear, another unraveling thread. The image of a great, wounded beast tangled in its own net, struggling and only making the binds tighter, seared itself into our minds. The voice did not plead. It simply stated a terrifying, absolute fact. You must help me restore balance before the fabric of existence tears apart. The directive was clear, the stakes incomprehensibly high. This was no longer a rescue mission or a first contact scenario. We were not just paramedics for existence, we were being asked to perform surgery on the universe itself. The entity's communication faded, leaving behind not silence, but the lingering, psychic echo of its agony. We stood there on a planet that sang of pain, the ghost of a friend, our only guide, faced with a task that defied all human scale. The choice to fight or follow was gone. Now we had to find a way to heal a god. Elara's form flickered, the light of her projection stuttering with the planet's distress. There's no more time for explanations. The first anchor point is failing, a binary system on the far edge of the Cygnus arm. The Weaver's pain is at its most acute there. A star chart, not from our computers but seemingly drawn in the humming air itself, materialized before us. Two stars, one a raging blue giant, the other a sullen red dwarf, were locked in a violently unstable dance, their gravitational pull warping the space around them into a turbulent storm of radiation and debris. "We need to stabilize it," her voice resonated, strained with effort. "It won't heal the Weaver, not fully, but it will ease its suffering and buy us the time we need to find a permanent solution." The journey was instantaneous. One moment we were standing on the singing world, the next the Resolute was shuddering violently. Alarms we recognized finally blaring as we were buffeted by the ferocious energy output of the dying binary system. On the main viewer, the scene was one of cosmic chaos. The blue star was actively cannibalizing its smaller partner, pulling vast streamers of superheated plasma from its surface in a brilliant, tragic arc of stellar destruction. The very fabric of space between them crackled with destructive energy. The dampeners, Kael barked, his voice steadying the crew, "Deploy them now." Pattern Epsilon, our ship launched a series of large, disc-like devices that flew into the maelstrom, positioning themselves at precise nodal points around the struggling stars. They glowed, activating not to suppress the energy but to harmonize it, to convert the violent, discordant frequencies into a stable, resonant chord. For a breathtaking moment, it seemed to be working. The chaotic light show began to steady, the violent shudders of the ship easing into a manageable vibration. A fragile, hard-won calm began to settle over the bridge. It was shattered in an instant. 3 jagged, gunmetal gray warships dropped out of warp directly into our formation, their designs brutally utilitarian and utterly alien. They didn't hail us. Their opening salvo was a volley of high-yield plasma torpedoes that slammed into our flank. overloading the dampeners we just placed and sending the binary system back into a spiraling frenzy. Evasive action, all power to aft shields, Kael roared, his hands flying across his console. Identify them, Elara's voice cut through the cacophony, her projection now overlaid on our tactical screen. The Disciples of the Void, she said, the name dripping with a venom we'd never heard from her. A cult, fanatics from a dozen different species who believe the Weaver's death will cause a great unraveling, a collapse of all dimensional barriers that will grant them ultimate power. They want to accelerate this. They're here to break the anchors, not save them. The battle was a nightmare fought on two fronts. We were dodging the Disciples' relentless attacks while trying to keep our own ship from being torn apart by the increasingly unstable stars. Our weapons fire glanced off their advanced shields. We were scientists and explorers. They were zealots built for war. We were losing. Then, a new signal flashed across our comms, a complex, invasive data stream originating from the planet we just left. I'm routing through their network, Elara's voice announced, now sharp and focused, the awe-filled guide replaced by the brilliant tactician we remembered. Their systems are archaic, prideful. They never expected someone to speak their language. We could see her in our mind's eye, a ghost in their machine, her consciousness flowing through their circuitry. On the viewer, the lead enemy ship's powerful shield flickered, then died completely, leaving its vulnerable hull exposed. Their primary reactor is unguarded. Its resonance frequency is 73.2 cycles. Now, Kael, fire now. Kael didn't hesitate. Target that frequency. All batteries fire. A single, precise beam of energy lanced out from the Resolute, not a brute force attack, but a surgical strike. It struck the enemy ship's power core, not with explosive force, but with a perfect matching resonance. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the Disciple ship went dark, every light on its hull extinguished, its weapons falling silent as it drifted, powerless and inert, into the pull of the dying stars. The remaining two ships, seeing their leader disabled so completely, broke off their attack and vanished into warp space. The immediate threat was gone, but the victory felt hollow. We had faced the abyss, and the abyss had sent fanatics to greet us. The scale of our task had just expanded from the cosmic to the theological. The silence on the bridge after the Disciples' retreat was thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the violent chaos that had just subsided. We had won a battle, but the cost was written across every console that still flickered with residual energy and every crew member's exhausted face. While the rest of us began damage assessments and system reboots, Commander Kael moved with a quiet intensity, his focus on the ship itself. The precision of the enemy's attack, their sudden appearance at the exact moment we were most vulnerable, it nagged at him. It felt less like an ambush and more like a trap sprung with perfect insider timing. He disappeared into the main data conduit access, a cramped chamber humming with the raw flow of the ship's information stream, to run a deep-level diagnostic on our communications array. What he found there was a quieter, more intimate betrayal than the cannons of the Disciples, a clandestine data stream, expertly encrypted and piggybacking on our own outgoing communications, was actively transmitting our shield modulation frequencies, our weapon power signatures, and our precise navigational data to an unknown recipient. And the source node wasn't some external hack, it was internal. It originated from the private terminal of our chief engineer, Jax. Kael didn't summon security. He went himself, finding Jax in main engineering, the man's hands still moving efficiently across a console as if he weren't simultaneously sabotaging everything we were trying to achieve. Kael didn't shout. His voice was low, a controlled vibration that carried more weight than any roar, cutting through the hum of the warp core. "Jax, secure your station." The engineer froze, his shoulders tensing for just a fraction of a second before he turned, his expression not one of shock or guilt, but of a cold, resolved defiance. Kael didn't need to elaborate. The look they exchanged said everything. Why Jax? The question was simple, but it carried the weight of their years serving together, of battles survived side by side, of a trust that now lay in shattered pieces at their feet. Jax met his commander's gaze without flinching. You heard the entity, same as I did, a weaver of realities, a god in chains. Elara speaks of its pain, its sacred balance. He spat the words out as if they were poison. She's been seduced by its whispers, but I heard something else in that voice. I heard an end to our limitations. His eyes gleamed with a frightening, zealous light. Its death won't be an end, Commander. It will be a beginning, a great unraveling. The disciples have it right, even if their motives are crude. With the dimensional barriers dissolved, the rules change. The playing field is wiped clean. Humanity wouldn't just be another species in the cosmos. We would be the architects of the next universe. We would reign supreme. I won't let your sentiment for one woman or your sympathy for a dying creature doom our entire species' future. His confession wasn't an apology, it was a manifesto. He saw himself not as a traitor, but as a visionary, a prophet willing to burn down all of creation for the chance to build a new one with humanity at its apex. In his mind, he was the ultimate patriot. Kael's hand was a blur, moving to his sidearm, but Jax was faster. With a final, contemptuous smirk, his fist slammed down on the main engineering console, not to fight, but to trigger a cascade failure. A klaxon unlike any other began to wail, a deep, pulsing siren that spoke of a core breach, a countdown to total annihilation. The ship is my offering to the new dawn. Jax shouted over the rising din, his eyes wild with fanatical light before he turned and fled into the smoke-filled corridor, leaving his former crew to burn. There was no time for pursuit, no time for anger or grief. The deck plates shuddered violently as secondary explosions rocked the Resolute. All hands abandoned ship. This is not a drill. Repeat, all hands to escape pods. Kael's voice roared through the comms, every syllable etched with the agony of the command. The bridge became a controlled storm of motion, crew members sprinting for the emergency bays, their training overriding their terror. Kael himself was the last to move, ensuring the evacuation order was broadcast to every corner of the dying vessel before he plunged into the chaotic hallway, the heat of the impending blast already searing the air. The escape pod was a claustrophobic capsule of silence, its hatch sealing just as the Resolute erupted in a final, glorious fireball that lit up the void. The shockwave sent the tiny pod spinning, its inertial dampeners straining. Inside, Kael and a handful of others, his most trusted officers, could only watch in grim silence as the ship that had been their home, their fortress, and their purpose was reduced to glittering, molten debris. They were adrift, utterly alone in the vast, uncaring darkness, the husk of their mission floating around them. Then, a soft, familiar light bloomed in the center of the cramped pod. It was Elara's projection, flickering unsteadily as if fighting through immense interference. Her form was strained, the serene awe replaced by a sharp, focused urgency. I saw it all, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of sound. I'm so sorry, there's no time to mourn. Jax's betrayal is a symptom of the larger decay. The Weaver's pain is escalating, and with every second, more minds are susceptible to that void, that promise of false power. A new star chart materialized in the air between them, a complex route plotted through a nebula they had once catalogued as empty. I'm rerouting your pod's navigation. There's a place, a listening post built by the first species the Weaver ever contacted. It's hidden in the gravitational shadow of a rogue planet. The disciples don't know it exists. It's safe for now. Her image flickered violently, a sign of the immense strain required to maintain the connection across such a vast distance. But we are running out of time. The stabilization at the binary system was only a temporary relief. The next anchor point, a supergiant in the Hydra constellation, is destabilizing. Its collapse is no longer a matter of days. My projections indicate it has hours, Kael, perhaps less. The wave of energy from its death will be catastrophic, and it will push the Weaver past the point of no return. You must get to the station, regroup, then you have to get to Hydra. This is our last chance." Her form dissolved into static, leaving them alone once more in the silent pod, but now with a destination and a deadline that felt like a weight around their very souls. The escape pod's trajectory was a silent, desperate glide, a speck of life adrift in the cosmic graveyard of their former ship. The rogue planet's gravitational shadow was a profound darkness, a void within the void that swallowed all light and sensor echoes. It was the perfect hiding place. Drifting from that absolute blackness like a ghost emerging from a tomb was the station. It was not a construction of metal and weld lines, but a single, impossibly large piece of crystalline material, its facets worn smooth by eons of exposure to the hard vacuum. It looked less built and more grown, or perhaps carved from the heart of a forgotten moon. A single, faint docking port, a hexagonal aperture that pulsed with a soft internal light, irised open as they approached, accepting their tiny pod without a sound. The interior air was still and ancient, tasting of ozone and something else, something like petrified memory. There was no power hum, no vibration of machinery. Light came from the walls themselves, from veins of soft, glowing energy that threaded through the obsidian like crystal. In the center of the main chamber, a massive, intricate console of the same crystalline material rose from the floor, its surfaces alive with flowing streams of light that were clearly data, but in a language that made the symbols from the anomaly look childish. Elara was waiting for them. Her form was no longer a flickering, unstable projection. Here at the source she was solid, radiant, and heartbreakingly detailed. You could see the individual strands of her hair moving in an unfelt breeze, the familiar worried lines at the corners of her eyes. She was both more and less real than she had ever been. "This place is a memory," she began, her voice no longer echoing from the air but seeming to originate from within their own minds, calm and clear. "A library built by the Corians, the first species the Weaver ever tried to reach. They didn't have the words for what they encountered, so they built this, a place to house the concepts." She gestured to the flowing data, and understanding flooded into them, not as words but as pure comprehension. They saw the Corians, a peaceful, aquatic species, first hearing the Weaver's song in the tides of their world. They felt their awe, their attempts to communicate, their eventual passing, leaving this station as a testament to the connection. Then Elara turned her full attention to Kael, her luminous eyes holding his with an intensity that transcended the physical. "My fall wasn't an accident, Kael. And it wasn't a rescue," she showed them. The vision washed over the survivors, pulling them into her memory. The terrifying shredding of her ship, the scream of metal, the blinding light, and then the sudden, shocking calm. There was no impact, there was only an embrace, a consciousness, vast and lonely and ancient, gently gathering the scattered pieces of her mind as her body was lost to the transition. It didn't speak, it simply was, and in that moment she was not consumed, she was invited. She saw the entirety of its existence, the countless millennia spent weaving galaxies into being, the profound love for the act of creation itself. She saw the moment of the catastrophic accident, the snap of a fundamental cord in the loom of reality that trapped it, its agony echoing backward and forward through time, manifesting as dying stars. "I merged with it," she whispered, the confession hanging in the ancient air, "to save a fragment of myself and to understand. My consciousness is now a part of its own, a single thread woven into its tapestry. That's how I can speak to you, that's how I know its truths." Her form flickered momentarily with a deep, shared sorrow. "This is the cost. I am here, but I am also there. I am your Elara, but I am also the Weaver. I have its knowledge, but I have lost my anchoring. My physical form is gone." The revelation was a seismic shock, recontextualizing everything. Her calm wasn't serenity, it was the perspective of a near god. Her urgency wasn't just a mission, it was the desperation of a being fighting for its own existence and the existence of all it had ever made. She stepped closer, her light reflecting in Kael's eyes. "You have to believe me now more than you ever have. The entity is not a monster, it is a creator. An artist on a cosmic scale. Its death will not be a simple end, it will be an unraveling, a great undoing." The vision she placed in their minds was not of an explosion, but of a quiet, terrible dissolution. Stars would not go out, they would simply cease to have ever existed. Galaxies would unwind into loose clouds of forgotten dust. Life, memory, history, every moment that had ever been woven into the fabric of reality would simply come apart at the seams. The disciples, Jax, they were not just wrong. They were fools trying to burn the library to feel the warmth of the flames without a thought for the knowledge within. Her final plea was a whisper that carried the weight of universes. "You have to trust me." The silence of the ancient station was shattered by a shrill, invasive alert, a frequency so crude and aggressive it was a physical violation of the Quarian's tranquil memory vault. The main crystalline console, which had been flowing with streams of soft, ancient light, flickered and was overrun by a harsh, pixelated transmission. Jax's face filled the viewer, but it was a face transformed. Gone was the defiant engineer. In his place was a hollow-eyed zealot, his features gaunt, his expression etched with a feverish certainty that was far more terrifying than any look of rage. He stood on the bridge of a disciple warship, the gunmetal gray walls a stark, ugly contrast to the organic beauty that surrounded Kael and his team. "Commander," Jax's voice crackled, stripped of any pretense of camaraderie, every syllable a blade. "I know you're listening. I can feel the echo of your presence, just as you can surely feel the truth of our purpose now." He didn't ask for their location. He didn't need to. His message was a broadcast, a declaration thrown into the void for anyone loyal to the old ways to hear. "Your sentimentality has run its course. The time for negotiation is over. We have the means to accelerate the inevitable." Behind him, a schematic flashed on a screen, a monstrous, asymmetrical device of terrifying simplicity, a star killer. "We are positioning the catalyst at the Hydra supergiant. You have one cycle to transmit the precise cosmic coordinates of the trapped entity. Surrender it to us." His eyes bored into the screen, gleaming with an absolute, unshakable conviction. "If you refuse, we will not simply destroy the anchor. We will detonate it. We will pour every ounce of the catalyst's energy into that star, overloading the Weaver's connection to it. The resulting shockwave of pain will not just be a scream, it will be a killing blow. The entity will be shattered, and the great unraveling will begin." He paused, letting the monstrous scale of his ultimatum hang in the air. "This is not a threat, Kael. It is a promise, and it is mercy. A clean, quick end for a dying god, and a glorious, limitless beginning for us, for all of humanity. The choice is yours, one cycle." The transmission cut, leaving the station plunged into a silence that was now deafening, heavy with the weight of a cataclysm. Every eye turned to Commander Kael. His face was granite, but his eyes held a storm. He moved to the console, his finger hovering over the response channel. He could have ordered a retreat, he could have pleaded, he could have tried to reason with the ghost of the man he once called crew. He did none of those things. He opened the channel, his voice low, calm, and carrying the immense, weary authority of a man who has stared into the abyss and understood its true nature. "Jax," he said, and the name was a eulogy. "You speak of understanding forces, but you are a child throwing a rock at a thunderstorm and claiming dominion over the sky." His words were not shouted, they were measured, precise, and carried a finality that was utterly chilling. "That device in your hands isn't a key to a new dawn. It's a scalpel you're trying to use to perform brain surgery on the universe. You are playing with forces whose depths you cannot possibly fathom, whose purpose you reduce to a petty fantasy of power. You will not control the unraveling, you will be the first thing consumed by it. He took a breath, his gaze unwavering. "This is your only warning. Stand down. Turn away from the star. There is still a path back from this brink, but you are running out of road." He closed the channel without waiting for a reply. The ultimatum had been given and met. The countdown had begun. The asteroid field was a brutal, churning maw of shattered rock and ice, a graveyard of celestial debris whipped into a frenzy by the relentless gravity of the nearby pulsar. Its beam, a spinning blade of pure radiation, swept across the field every few seconds, turning the void into a lethal disco of death. Navigating it was madness. Engaging in a dogfight within it was suicide. But the disciple's ship, Jax's new command, was a dark scar against the pulsar's light, already deep within the field and maneuvering toward the monstrous catalyst device anchored to a large nickel-iron asteroid. There was no time for a plan, only for action. After them, full thrust, Kael's order was the only option left. Their ship, a small, agile scout vessel they'd commandeered from the station, was tossed like a leaf in a hurricane. Alarms blared constantly, warning of imminent collisions with spinning rock fragments and crippling radiation spikes from the pulsar. The disciple ship was larger, more powerful, but it was also less nimble, its pilot forced to take wider, more predictable arcs to avoid the largest obstacles. "He's taking the inside track around the 7th large asteroid." Elara's voice cut through the chaos, her tone the eye of their storm. She wasn't just reading their sensors, she was calculating the gravitational eddies of the entire field, predicting the pulsar's next sweep, seeing the battlefield in 4 dimensions. "Cut your engines now. Let the gravity of the fragment labeled Sigma 9 pull you. It will slingshot you into his blind spot." It was a move that defied every piloting instinct. To kill your engines in such a volatile environment was to surrender to chaos, but they trusted her. The engines died, and for a terrifying moment they were adrift, a piece of debris among millions. Then the gravitational pull of the large asteroid seized them, yanking them forward on a new, impossibly fast trajectory that shot them underneath the disciple ship just as it completed its turn. Their cannons roared, striking the enemy's engine nacelles in a shower of sparks. The larger ship shuddered, its thrust faltering. His dorsal docking hatch is aligned with ours. "It's now or never, Kael. The magnetic seals will hold for 90 seconds in this turbulence, no longer." The clang of metal on metal was a violent, jarring sound as the two ships connected. Kael was already at the airlock, helmet sealed, pulse rifle in hand. "You have the bridge," was all he said to his second before the inner hatch sealed and the outer one blew open, revealing the narrow, pressurized tunnel linking the two vessels. He moved through it alone, a ghost in the machine, entering the belly of the beast he had once called his own. The corridors of the disciple ship were dark, lit only by emergency strips of harsh red light, the air thick with the smell of ozone and something acrid like burned wiring. He met no resistance. They were a skeleton crew, all hands undoubtedly on the bridge or at the weapon controls. He found Jax not on the bridge but in the main hold, standing before the catalyst device. It was even more horrifying up close, a spire of polished, non-reflective metal covered in pulsing energy conduits that throbbed with a sickly green light. Jax had his back to him, his hands moving across a control panel, inputting the final sequence. He didn't turn as Kael entered, the rifle aimed squarely at his back. "It's over, Jax. Step away from the console." Kael's voice was flat, stripped of all emotion, all history. It was the voice of pure consequence. Jax's hands finished their work. A deep, resonant hum filled the room, emanating from the device itself. He finally turned, and a slow, contemptuous smile spread across his face. There was no fear in his eyes, only a fanatical, triumphant glee. Over he laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "It's only just beginning. You're right on time for the curtain call, Commander." He gestured to the console, where a final countdown ticked down from 60 seconds. "The core is primed. The energy transfer is irreversible. Your scientist friend was right about one thing. The connection to the Weaver is a two-way street. The pain from this detonation won't just break the anchor. It will travel directly down that connection like a lightning rod straight into its heart. He took a step forward, spreading his arms wide as if to embrace the coming annihilation. You can shoot me, it won't matter, you can't stop the sequence. The only thing left to do is watch. So tell me, Kael, what do you think nothing looks like? The countdown froze at 5 seconds, the numbers on the console screen locking in place with a sharp digital squeal. The resonant hum of the catalyst device didn't cease, but it stuttered, its rhythm fracturing into a pained, discordant stammer. The sickly green light pulsing through its conduits flickered erratically, casting Jax's triumphant face in a strobe of confusion and dawning rage. "What is this?" he snarled, his fingers stabbing uselessly at the now unresponsive console. "What have you done?" It wasn't Kael. He stood his ground, the rifle still trained on Jax, but his eyes flickered to the air beside him where a new presence was forming. Elara's projection shimmered into existence, but it was horrifyingly wrong. She was translucent, her form wavering like a heat haze, the details of her face blurring and dissolving at the edges. She wasn't standing, she was braced as if against a hurricane-force wind, one ethereal arm outstretched toward the catalyst, her hand clenched in a white-knuckled grip of pure will. The strain was written in every flickering line of her being. "I can see its heart," she gasped, her voice a thin, shredded whisper that seemed to be torn from her very core. The connection, it's a feedback loop. He's right, the energy transfer is irreversible from this end. I'm holding the door closed. A violent tremor racked her projection, and for a heart-stopping second, she vanished completely before struggling to reform, even fainter than before. "But I can't hold it, the pressure, it's immense. It's like trying to stop a supernova with your bare hands." Her luminous eyes found Kael's, filled with a desperate, agonized urgency. "You have to jettison the entire device. Now, the pulsar's core, its magnetic field is the only thing in this system powerful enough to contain the blast and sever the connection to the Weaver. It's the only way." Jax let out a roar of pure fury, lunging not for Kael, but for the projector array on the wall, aiming to smash the hardware that was hosting her fading signal. Kael's rifle barked once, a precise shot that shattered the console's main power coupling instead, plunging the room into near darkness save for the erratic, failing glow of the catalyst and the faint, dying light of Elara's form. The manual release, Kael barked into his calm, his voice cutting through the chaos. On the starboard wall, a large red lever behind a safety grate. From the scout ship, his pilot's voice came back, strained but clear. "I see it, but Commander, the magnetic seals. If we disengage the docking clamps to jettison their cargo hold, our ship will be thrown clear by the turbulence." "The math doesn't work. We won't be able to redock. You'll be stuck on that ship when it goes into the pulsar," Elara cried out, a sound of pure anguish. Her form flickered down to a mere silhouette of light. "There's no time for another way. Kael, please." The frozen numbers on the countdown screen flickered. A 4 appeared, then a 3. She was losing her grip. Kael didn't look at the numbers. He looked at the ghost of the woman he had crossed the universe to find, now sacrificing the last shreds of her existence to give them this one chance. He made the only choice left. He slammed his hand down on his comm link. "Do it, blow the clamps and get clear. That's an order." His voice didn't waver. It was the calm, absolute authority of a man who had already accepted the cost. He turned his rifle back on Jax, a final, unspoken barrier between the engineer and any last, desperate attempt to stop what had to happen. The response was immediate. A series of heavy, metallic thumps echoed through the ship's hull as the docking clamps explosively disengaged. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of tortured metal, the entire disciple ship was flung violently away from the scout vessel, spinning out into the churning asteroid field, its cargo bay doors yawning open. The catalyst device, torn from its moorings, tumbled out into the void, a silent, deadly tombstone. Elara's projection gave Kael one last, heartbreaking look of profound sorrow and unimaginable pride. And then, as the last of her energy was spent, she vanished completely, her light extinguished. The countdown on the console, freed from her will, snapped from 2 to 1 to 0. The ship screamed around him, a dying beast in its final throes. Kael's hand found the manual release, a cold, unforgiving lever hidden behind a shattered grate. He hauled on it with every ounce of strength left in his body, the mechanism shrieking in protest. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar of explosive bolts and shearing metal, the entire section of the hull containing the catalyst tore away, spinning into the violent chaos of the asteroid field. The force of the ejection sent the disciple ship into a wild, uncontrolled tumble, throwing Kael against a bulkhead with a brutal impact that stole the air from his lungs. Out in the void, the catalyst device flared once, a tiny, brilliant star of malevolent green light. Then it erupted. The explosion was utterly silent and profoundly violent, a sphere of annihilating energy that vaporized asteroids and sent a devastating shockwave ripping through the field. It hit the disciple ship like a physical blow, crushing the hull and sending them spinning directly toward the hungry maw of the pulsar's deadly beam. Alarms that had been silenced by damage were now screaming anew, a final, panicked chorus for a dying vessel. Through the cracked viewport, Kael could see their scout ship, buffeted by the same wave but already fighting to correct its course, pulling away to a safe distance. They had made it, his crew was safe, and then, through the static and the groan of failing metal, her voice returned one last time. It was the faintest whisper, a breath of sound woven through the cracks in reality, so frail it seemed it might break apart with the next word. Kael, it was Elara, but it was barely her. The strength, the awe, the cosmic certainty, all of it was gone, stripped away by the colossal effort of holding back the inevitable. "I'm weakening." The words were a sigh of exhaustion, the sound of a frayed thread finally snapping. The blast, it damaged the connection. "My hold here is tenuous." There was a long pause, filled only by the ominous creak of the ship's frame. "This isn't over. The entity, its pain, is the root. You have to find the source." A final, immense effort seemed to gather in her fading voice, a last surge of will to impart a crucial truth. "Find the heart of the entity. It's not a metaphor, it's a place, a physical anchor for its consciousness." An image bloomed in Kael's mind, vivid and breathtakingly beautiful. The vast, crystalline nebula they had first emerged into, its geometric lattice pulsing with a soft, internal light. But now he saw it differently. He saw it not as a structure, but as a cage, a prison of sublime beauty holding a suffering creator. "It's in the center, the very center of the nebula we first saw." Her voice was fading fast now, dissolving into the hiss of interstellar radiation. "That is where it is trapped. That is where its pain originates. Only there can we end this." The signal dissolved into pure, empty static, leaving behind a silence more absolute and terrible than any he had ever known. She was gone again, but this time she had not fallen. She had spent the last of herself to light the way. The ship slid into the nebula's outer tendrils and the universe changed. The serene, crystalline beauty we'd witnessed from a distance was a lie. Up close, it was a maelstrom of screaming light and dissonant energy, a psychic storm made physical. The vessel groaned, not from physical stress, but from the sheer weight of the emotion pouring into it. It was the weaver's pain, given form and voice, and it reached for us not with claws, but with memories. A console officer to my left suddenly cried out, recoiling from his station as if burned. "I'm back there at the academy. They're telling me I failed. They're stripping my commission." His face was a mask of raw humiliation and despair. Across the bridge, our tactical officer froze, her hands hovering over her controls, her eyes wide with a private horror. "The fire," she whispered. "I can smell the smoke. I can hear them calling for me. I couldn't get to them." The entity wasn't attacking our ship, it was attacking us. It found the secret shames, the buried griefs, the most devastating moments of our lives, and made us relive them in perfect, torturous detail. The air itself thickened with the collective anguish, a suffocating fog of regret and sorrow. I felt it too, the cold vacuum of the day we lost Elara, the crushing guilt of command, the weight of every life lost under my watch. It threatened to pull me under, to drown me in a sea of what-ifs and if-onlys. The ship began to drift, its course faltering as the crew succumbed to the psychic onslaught. We were losing our way, caught in a labyrinth of our own worst moments. Then a sound, faint, almost lost in the psychic screaming, but unmistakable. A whisper of a familiar frequency, a ghost of a voice cutting through the static of despair. Steady your mind, Kael. It's an echo, just an echo. It can only hurt you if you believe it's real. It was Elara, her voice strained, fighting to reach us through the entity's overwhelming distress. Her words were a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. I gripped the command console, my knuckles white, and forced my voice to remain level, to project a certainty I desperately needed to feel. Listen to me, all of you, listen, it's not real. Focus on my voice, focus on her voice. She is our guide. She is our truth in this. I met the eyes of each crew member, one by one, pulling them back from their private hells. The pain you feel is not yours to carry. It is a wound we have come to heal. Remember why we are here. Remember her. The ship's tremors seemed to lessen just a fraction, the course correcting as hands returned to consoles, shaking but determined. We were battered, emotionally ravaged, but we were not broken. The heart of the entity lay ahead, and we were close. The corridor ended, opening into a cavern of such immense scale that our ship, floating at its center, was a mere speck of dust in a grand cathedral. And there, hanging in the void before us, was the heart of it all. It was a massive, luminous orb, its surface a swirling vortex of light and shadow, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat that vibrated through the very hull of our vessel. But this was no beat of life, it was a cadence of pure, unadulterated agony. Each thrumming pulse sent waves of fractured, discordant color radiating outward, and with them came a fresh wave of the psychic pain we had battled through, now concentrated into an almost unbearable intensity. We were not just looking at the source of the entity's suffering, we were floating inside its wounded, breaking heart. The air beside me shimmered, particles of light struggling to coalesce against the overwhelming anguish pouring from the orb. Elara's form flickered into existence, so faint and translucent I could see the raging heart right through her. She was a ghost of a ghost, the last vestige of her energy stretched to its absolute limit just to maintain this fragile connection. Her voice, when it came, was a thin, reedy whisper that seemed to be torn away by the psychic storm, forcing us to lean in, to hang on every strained word. "You see it now," she breathed, her luminous eyes fixed on the terrible, beautiful spectacle. "The wound is not physical. It's a fracture in its conscious connection to the anchors, to the tapestry itself. The unraveling is a feedback loop of pain, and it's tearing it apart from the inside." She turned her gaze toward us, and the sorrow in it was a heavier burden than any we had yet carried. Stabilizing the individual anchors was only a temporary measure, a bandage on a severed artery. To truly heal this, to mend the fracture, we have to synchronize them, all of them. We must create a single, harmonious resonance across the entire network of stars, a chord so perfect and stable it can counteract the discord of the unraveling and give the weaver the stability it needs to heal itself. The concept was staggering, a task of such cosmic engineering it felt like being asked to tune every instrument on Earth to play a single, flawless note at the exact same moment. Then her form flickered violently, and her whisper dropped even lower, the words filled with a dreadful, final weight. But to initiate that synchronization, to create the initial surge of coherent energy that can travel the threads and align them, it requires a catalyst. A massive, conscious surge directed right here into the heart. She looked from the orb to me, and her meaning became terrifyingly clear. It requires a sacrifice, Kael. A willing consciousness must pour every ounce of its energy, its memory, its very essence into the heart to spark the chain reaction. It's the only way. The silence that followed was heavier than the void outside, the truth of her words settling upon us with the gravity of a black hole. We had come to save a friend and found a god, and now we were being asked which one we would choose to die. A new alarm, shrill and localized, screamed from the docking bay control panel. The external sensor feed, glitching through the psychic interference, showed a small, battered escape pod, scarred from the pulsar's fury, clumsily locking onto our airlock. The inner hatch hissed open, and a figure stumbled onto the bridge, supported by 2 security officers who looked as stunned as we felt. It was Jax. His disciple uniform was torn and smeared with soot. One side of his face was a latticework of fresh burns, and he moved with the painful, halting steps of a man who had just cheated death by inches. But it was his eyes that held us all frozen. The fanatical fire was gone, extinguished. In its place was a hollow, shattered clarity, a window into a soul that had seen the true face of the abyss it had tried to worship. He collapsed to his knees before the main viewer, before the terrifying, beautiful spectacle of the entity's breaking heart. He didn't look at any of us. His gaze was locked on the swirling vortex of agony, and as he watched, a profound, gut-wrenching shudder racked his entire body. I saw it, he whispered, his voice raw and broken, stripped of all its former arrogance. When the catalyst blew for a second, the feedback, I felt it. I felt everything. He finally turned his head, his eyes finding mine, and the remorse in them was a physical force. Its love for every atom it ever spun into being. Its terror at the unmaking. The pain commander, the pain is, he choked on the word, unable to give voice to the unimaginable. I was wrong, we were all wrong. It doesn't want to die, it's fighting with everything it has just to exist. He bowed his head, a single tear cutting a clean path through the grime on his cheek. My ambition, my pride, I would have been the author of all that beauty's death. Let me help, please, let me give it back something. He struggled to his feet, a new, desperate resolve hardening his features. He looked from the heart to me, his offer simple and absolute. The energy required a conscious sacrifice, my life force, my energy. It's the only thing I have left that's worth anything. Let me be the catalyst, let my death be the spark that starts the synchronization. It's a penance I am willing to pay. He meant it, every word. In that moment, he was no longer a traitor or a fanatic, but a man desperately seeking redemption in the only way he knew how, by offering the last thing he owned. My hand shot out, gripping his arm before he could take a step toward the console, before he could input any final command. He flinched at the contact, expecting violence, condemnation, anything but what came next. "No, Jax," I said, my voice low but firm, echoing in the cavernous space. "We don't trade one life for another, not even for a god." That was their way. The disciples' way, it's not ours. I released his arm, turning to face the heart, to face the faint, fading ghost of the woman who had brought us here. We do this together. I looked up toward the ceiling, toward the stars, toward wherever her essence was now woven into the fabric of the universe. "Elara," I called out, my voice steady with a faith that felt as solid as the deck beneath my feet. "You're the bridge, you're the conductor, we are the orchestra. Guide us, show us the chord, we will play it for you." Her response was not a voice but a feeling, a wave of profound, overwhelming gratitude that washed over the entire bridge, momentarily eclipsing the entity's pain. The main console, which had been displaying the chaotic energy readings of the heart, suddenly resolved into a stunning, intricate pattern of light. It was a musical score written in pure energy, a complex, interweaving harmony of frequencies that represented the perfect, stable resonance of every anchored star in the network. It wasn't a command for a single, grand sacrifice. It was a request for a chorus. Jax understood instantly. He moved to the engineering station, his hands, which had once built a weapon of destruction, now flying across the console with a frantic, focused grace, rerouting power, aligning the ship's emitter to the exact frequency Elara provided. Across the bridge, every crew member found their station alight with a part of the whole, a single note in the cosmic chord. The helm controlled the timbre, weapons the amplitude, life support the sustain. My console became the conductor's podium, the focus for the collective will of every soul on board. We looked at each other, a crew reunited not by orders but by purpose, and as one, we placed our hands on our panels and we began to pour not just power but everything we were, our hope, our regret, our love, our memory into the song. The ship began to hum, a deep, resonant note that built in strength and purity, pushing back against the dissonant screams of the heart, a single point of perfect harmony in a universe of pain. The ship's hum was no longer just a sound. It became a physical vibration that resonated deep within our bones, a pure, rising tone that pushed back against the chaotic scream of the wounded heart before us. On the main console, the intricate score of light that Elara had provided began to synchronize with our output. Each section of the ship, helm, weapons, life support, engineering, contributing its unique frequency to the forming chord. We were no longer just a crew operating systems. We were an instrument being tuned to a cosmic scale, each of us a vital note in a harmony meant to heal a god. Elara's presence was everywhere and nowhere, the air itself seeming to guide our hands to focus our collective intention. Her voice, when it came, was no longer a whisper but a clear, commanding thread woven directly into the music of our effort. The alignment is holding, the network is responding. Now direct everything, all power, all intention into the main emitter. Pour it all into the beam now. As one, we complied. There was no hesitation. Every hand pressed down on their console, every mind focused not on a technical command, but on a single, unified purpose to give. To pour every ounce of our hope, our will, our very essence into the light we were creating. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a beam of pure, white gold energy erupted from our ship's central spire, not a weapon of destruction but a lance of pure, coherent harmony. It struck the center of the swirling, agonized heart, and for a terrifying second the entity recoiled, the dissonant screams intensifying into a final, desperate shriek of resistance. The ship shuddered violently, and I feared we had only amplified its pain. But then the light began to change. The beam didn't pierce, it suffused. It flowed into the fractured heart like water into parched earth, the golden light spreading through the swirling vortex in delicate, lace-like patterns. The violent, jarring pulses of agony began to slow, their rhythm steadying, deepening into a strong, regular beat that resonated in perfect time with the harmonic tone from our ship. The horrific psychic storm of anguish that had battered us quieted, the echoes of our deepest regrets and shames softening from a scream to a murmur, and then fading away entirely, replaced by a sensation of profound, overwhelming gratitude that brought tears to the eyes of every person on the bridge. And across the universe, the effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. On the main viewer, a stellar map flickered to life, displaying the dozens of anchor points, the stars we had once seen as dying. One by one, their frantic, unstable flickering began to calm. The cannibalistic binary system we had nearly died stabilizing winked into a perfect, balanced equilibrium, the violent stream of plasma between the stars dissolving into a gentle, beautiful bridge of light. A supergiant on the verge of a catastrophic collapse flared once, not in explosion but in renewal, its angry red hue softening to a steady, brilliant white. Each stabilization was a note sliding into perfect pitch, the entire celestial orchestra finding its harmony. The entity's cries of pain did not just stop, they transformed. They became sighs of immense cosmic relief, a sound like the first breath after a long illness, like the gentle settling of a world after a quake. The heart before us was no longer a vortex of torment. It pulsed with a serene, brilliant light, its surface smoothing into a calm, radiant orb. We had not just stopped the unraveling, we had given the weaver the strength to begin weaving again. The golden light from the healed heart began to fade, its rhythmic pulse now a steady, quiet hum of restored equilibrium. The ship fell silent, the immense harmonic chord we had sung together dissolving into a peaceful stillness. We had done it, we had saved everything, but the victory felt hollow, for the cost was now coming due. Elara's projection, which had been our constant guide, began to flicker wildly, not with strain but with a final, fading energy. The particles of light that formed her image were unraveling, drifting apart like embers on a soft wind. She looked at me, and in her eyes was no fear, only a profound and weary peace. "It's done," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost inaudible, yet it carried the weight of a universe. "The balance is restored, but it's fragile. Like a delicate piece of glass, it needs a constant presence to hold it, to keep the harmony from slipping back into discord." Her form dimmed further, becoming almost completely transparent. My consciousness, it's the only thing woven tightly enough into its fabric to act as that anchor. The bridge we built can't be taken down, I have to stay. A soft, sad smile touched her lips as she looked around at all of us, her gaze finally resting on me. "This isn't an end, Kael. It's a different kind of existence. I won't be gone. I'll be in the spin of every new galaxy, in the light of every stable star, in the quiet hum of the cosmos itself. I'll be the peace in the silence." Her image dissolved one final time, but instead of vanishing into nothingness, it streamed outward in a final, beautiful cascade of light, flowing into the now serene heart of the entity, becoming one with the creator she had saved. Her last words hung in the air, a final, gentle breath of sound that settled over the bridge like a blessing. "Tell them," the whisper echoed, "that I didn't fall through the star. Tell them I ascended." And then there was only the quiet hum of the ship and the steady, peaceful pulse of the healed universe. We had gained eternity, but we had lost our friend. We stood there in the silence, not as conquerors, but as witnesses to a sacrifice that would forever echo in the fabric of reality. The mission was over. The long journey home awaited, and we would carry a new story back with us, not one of catastrophic loss, but of a luminous, conscious universe and the woman who chose to become its soul. The silence that followed was not the quiet of emptiness, but the profound hush of a universe finally at rest. On the main viewer, the star charts told a new story. The frantic, unstable blinking of the anchor points had ceased, replaced by the steady, gentle glow of stars in perfect equilibrium. The disciples' remaining ships did not jump to warp. They drifted, their weapons powered down, their aggressive posture gone. A single, unarmed shuttle launched from the lead vessel, navigating slowly toward our crippled ship. Its message was not one of defiance, but of surrender and profound shame. Their leader, his voice stripped of the fanatical zeal we had come to expect, pledged their fleet, their resources, and their lives to a new purpose, not to unravel existence, but to become its guardians. They would dedicate themselves to monitoring the anchors, ensuring the harmony we had fought so hard to create would never be threatened again. It was not a victory of conquest, but a truce born from shared awe and a collective understanding of the delicate beauty we had almost destroyed. Commander Kael stood at the observation port, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the serene, pulsating heart of the nebula. The crew moved around him, beginning the arduous tasks of damage control and setting a course for home, but in that moment he was perfectly still. The battle was over, the mission complete, yet the weight on his shoulders seemed different now, not lighter but transformed. He finally turned to face us, his crew, his family. The lines of stress and command were still etched on his face, but his eyes held a new light, a reflection of the stable stars shining behind him. His voice, when he spoke, was low and carried the gravity of a vow made not just to us, but to the memory of the woman who had become starlight. She gave everything for this peace, he said, his words settling over the bridge like a benediction. We will honor that sacrifice. We will protect this gift. We will not let her universe unravel. It was more than a statement. It was a new founding principle, a compass that would guide us not just back to known space, but into a future we were now tasked with safeguarding. The voyage home would be long, but we would travel through a cosmos healed, carrying with us the quiet hum of a promise kept and a dawn we had all helped to create. The journey back was a quiet pilgrimage through a healed cosmos. Each star system we passed felt different, no longer just points of light, but notes in a grand, silent symphony we now knew was conscious, was alive. We were forever changed, carrying a secret too immense to articulate, the memory of Elara's sacrifice a constant, quiet hum in the background of our thoughts. We expected to return to a world that had simply continued on, unaware of how close it had come to absolute dissolution. But as we dropped out of warp at the edge of the Sol system, our long-range sensors began picking up something extraordinary, a phenomenon that defied all our understanding of physics and psychology. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a signal, it was a resonance, a faint but unmistakable psychic echo emanating from Earth itself, a harmonic frequency that mirrored the stable chord we had sung into the entity's heart. Our communications channels were flooded not with panic or distress, but with millions upon millions of fragmented, overlapping data packets from planetary networks, medical reports, social media streams, scientific journals, all pointing to the same impossible event. Across the globe, people were waking up with the same dream vividly etched into their minds, not a nightmare of chaos, but a vision of profound serenity. A woman made of starlight, standing before a pulsing, luminous heart, her hands outstretched not in warning but in welcome. And with her, a feeling, a concept rather than words of a vast, loving consciousness, a weaver tending to the loom of reality. They didn't know her name, but we did. It was Elara and the entity. This was no isolated incident. It was a global shared experience cutting across cultures, languages, and ages. People who had never looked up at the night sky with anything more than passing curiosity were suddenly filled with an inexpressible awe for the cosmos. Artists were creating works featuring nebulas they could never have seen. Musicians were composing pieces with harmonies that felt alien and yet deeply familiar. A new, unspoken connection was threading its way through humanity, a subtle but profound sense that we were not alone in the universe, but part of a magnificent, interconnected whole. The gateway we had feared was a destructive tear had, in its healing, become something else entirely, a conduit not for ships but for understanding. It was then that our comm system, which had been silent save for the mundane chatter of solar system traffic, activated of its own accord. A familiar frequency, one we thought we'd never hear again, washed over the bridge clear and strong and filled with a gentle warmth. It was Elara's voice, but it was no longer the strained whisper of a ghost in the machine. It was the voice of the universe itself, calm, vast, and imbued with an infinite patience. "The journey is complete," she said, and her words felt less like a sound and more like a truth settling into our bones. The balance is held, but the work is not over. The gateway is now open, not for vessels of metal, but for minds and spirits. It is open for those who seek understanding, not conquest. For those who wish to listen, not to command. Her message was not a call to arms, but a call to awakening. She was not offering humanity technology or power. She was offering a perspective, an invitation to join a conversation that had been going on since the first star was born. The shared dreams were not an invasion, but the first gentle notes of that conversation, a way to prepare hearts and minds for a truth too large to be delivered any other way. We realized then that our mission had never been just about saving existence from a catastrophic end. It was about midwifing a new beginning, a new chapter in the story of humanity where we finally step out of our cosmic isolation and recognize our place not as masters of the universe, but as cherished participants within a conscious, living creation. We were coming home, but we were returning to a world that was already, beautifully, beginning to remember the song. The debriefing chamber was a sterile, silent box, a world away from the screaming chaos of the nebula and the resonant hum of the station. The faces of the High Command stared back at Kael from the other side of the polished table, their expressions a mixture of skepticism, exhaustion, and a dawning, terrified awe. They had the preliminary reports, the sensor logs, the cold, hard data of stars that had been on the verge of death and were now stable. They had the testimony of the disciples, their fanaticism broken and replaced by a zealous vow of guardianship. But they didn't have the context, they didn't have the song. Kael stood before them, not as a conquering hero, but as a witness. He spoke for hours, his voice a low, steady river of words carving a new channel through their understanding of reality. He didn't talk of weapons or battleships, he spoke of resonance and harmony. He described the pain of the entity not as a weapon to be feared, but as a wound to be healed, a sickness in the fabric of everything. He painted a picture of the crystalline station, not as an alien fortress, but as a library of concepts built by a species that had learned to listen to the music of the spheres. And then he told them about Elara, not just her fall, but her transformation. He explained her not as a casualty or a ghost, but as a bridge, a conscious thread woven into the tapestry of a creator. He described her final moments not as a death, but as an ascension, a conscious choice to become the anchor for a peace that required constant, loving attention. She is the stability in the silence now, he said, his voice gaining a strength that filled the quiet room. Her consciousness is the harmony that holds the notes together. She didn't just save us, she gave the universe a nervous system, a way to feel its own existence and keep itself in tune. He concluded not with a list of recommendations or a request for resources, but with a simple, profound statement that reframed the entire human experience. The official report will detail the quantum fluctuations and the energy signatures. It will speak of cosmic stabilization and unprecedented phenomena. But the truth is so much simpler and so much greater. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze unwavering. Dr. Elara Vance fell through a star, and on the other side she found not death or aliens, but connection. She showed us that we are not alone in a cold, empty universe. We are participants in a conscious, living creation. We are part of something infinite. The silence that followed was thicker than any he had experienced in space. It was the sound of paradigms shifting, of worldviews cracking open to make room for a universe that was vaster, stranger, and more beautiful than they had ever dared to dream. The mission was over, but the discovery had just begun. Humanity had been given a new story to tell itself, not one of isolation, but of a sacred, cosmic belonging. Months bled into one another, a quiet river of routine and repair. The Resolute, or what remained of her, was docked in high orbit, a silent monument to a story most of Earth's population would only ever know as a strange shared dream. Commander Kael had traded the vibrating deck plates of a starship for the steady, unforgiving floor of an admiral's office. The reports were endless, the debriefings a cycle of the same unanswerable questions from officials who could not or would not truly listen to the answers. He was a hero in a gilded cage, his greatest victory a weight that isolated him more than any deep space mission ever had. He found himself staring out the viewport not at the stars, but at the bureaucratic traffic of orbital stations, the vibrant, living cosmos he had saved reduced to a picture on a wall. It was during one of these hollow moments, the low hum of the station a poor substitute for the warp core's song, that his private terminal activated itself. No alert sounded, no priority message flashed. The screen simply brightened, displaying a real-time feed from a deep space monitoring array focused on a single, unremarkable yellow star in a nearby system, a star that had until that moment been utterly unremarkable. But now it was pulsing, not with the chaotic, dying rhythm of the unraveling, but with a clean, precise, and heartbreakingly familiar pattern. It was a perfect sine wave of light, a visual representation of a harmonic frequency he had helped to sing into the heart of creation itself. His breath caught in his throat. It was her signature, and then her voice was there, not through the speakers but in the air of the room, in the quiet space between his own thoughts. It was the softest of whispers, a breath of sound that carried the warmth of a remembered sun and the cool, infinite patience of the void. Kael. It was all she said at first, and in that single syllable was an ocean of understanding, of shared sacrifice, of a connection that had transcended space and time and the very definition of life itself. He didn't answer, he couldn't. He simply listened, his hands going still on the console, the weight of the Admiral's uniform suddenly feeling like a costume. "The work continues," her whisper sighed, and he could feel the immense, gentle effort of her focus, of maintaining this fragile thread across a distance not measured in light years but in states of being. The tapestry is whole, but it is a living thing. It requires attention, a gentle hand. There was a pause, a moment of quiet that felt like the universe itself holding its breath. "I am always here. I am in the spin of every new galaxy taking its first breath. I am in the steady, patient light of the oldest, quietest stars. I am the gravity that holds worlds in their dance and the space that allows them to move." Her voice was not that of a human woman anymore, but it was still Elara. It was her compassion, her brilliant mind, her unwavering will, now amplified to a cosmic scale. She was not haunting him, she was letting him know she was home. The star on the screen pulsed one last time, a final, soft flash that seemed to settle in the quiet room. Her voice faded, but the words she left behind did not feel like a goodbye. They felt like a key, a new way of seeing the world he had returned to. "Remember," the whisper echoed, fainter than a memory. "Every end is a beginning waiting for its song." And then she was gone. The screen returned to its standard display. The ambient hum of the station rushed back into the silence, but everything was different. Kael looked out the viewport again, but now he didn't see traffic and bureaucracy. He saw a starfield, each pinprick of light a note in an endless, beautiful symphony, each one a part of her. He was not alone in a silent universe. He was sitting in the heart of a conversation that had been going on since the dawn of time, and he finally knew how to listen. The mission was over, but his purpose had just truly begun. For Kael, the sterile silence of the Admiral's office had become a cage. The star field beyond his viewport, once a canvas of infinite possibility, now felt like a painting hanging on a wall, beautiful but separate, untouchable. The whispers of bureaucracy and the endless cycle of debriefings were a muffling blanket over the profound symphony he now knew the universe to be. He had faced the heart of creation itself, had helped sing a wounded god back to health, and now he was being asked to file reports about quantum fluctuation anomalies. The disconnect was a physical ache, a constant, low-grade hum of wrongness that no amount of official commendations could silence. He stared at his reflection in the polished surface of his desk, seeing not a decorated commander, but a conduit that had been unplugged from the source. The memory of Elara's final message, her voice woven into the very fabric of reality, was both a comfort and a relentless calling. He had been given a key to understanding the cosmos, and to leave it unused on a ring of administrative duties felt like the deepest form of betrayal. The peace they had won was not a destination. It was a living, breathing thing that required tending, and he knew, with a certainty that settled deep into his bones, that his place was not behind a desk but out there among the notes of the song. He didn't request permission. He didn't submit a proposal for review by a committee. True understanding could never be found in the cautious language of official documents. Instead, he sent out a single, encoded pulse on a private frequency, a signal that contained no words, only a data packet, the precise harmonic resonance of the chord they had sung together into the weaver's heart. It was a key that only a handful of people in the universe would recognize, and a summons they would be unable to ignore. one by one, they arrived at the old, derelict docking bay where the first Resolute had been commissioned. Not the shiny, official hangars, but a place steeped in the ghosts of past adventures. There was the tactical officer who had faced the phantom fire of her greatest regret, the helmsman who had navigated the screaming chaos of the psychic storm, the communications specialist who had learned to listen not just to words but to the silence between them. And there was Jax standing a little apart, his face still etched with the shadows of his penance, but his eyes clear and steady, met only with nods of quiet acknowledgement. They were different people than they had been before the star, each carrying their own private echo of the universe's pain and its salvation. Kael stood before them, not on a raised podium, but on the same deck level, his admiral's jacket discarded over a crate, leaving only the simple black uniform of a field commander. He didn't need to command their attention, he already had it. The air was thick with unspoken history and shared purpose. "They're giving me a new ship," he began, his voice low and carrying easily in the vast, quiet space. "A prototype, faster, smarter, with a resonance-based communication system designed from the schematics we pulled from the Corian station. They're calling it a deep space exploration vessel." He paused, letting the bureaucratic label hang in the air, its inadequacy almost humorous. "But we know what it really is." He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze including Jax without flinching. "The official mission is to monitor the stabilized anchor points. To observe, to file reports." A faint, wry smile touched his lips, "But our mission is something else entirely. Elara didn't just show us that the universe is alive. She showed us that it needs guardians, not enforcers with weapons, but stewards, listeners." His voice strengthened, filling the hangar bay with a new kind of authority, one born not of rank but of experience. That star wasn't a one-time anomaly, it was the first thread. There will be other gates, other nascent connections, other beings stumbling toward understanding just as we did. Some will approach with wonder, others. His glance toward Jax was an acknowledgement of the darkness they had faced. Others will come with fear or greed or a hunger for power they cannot comprehend. They will see a door to be kicked down, not a threshold to be honored. He took a step forward, his passion now a palpable force. "We have felt the Weaver's love for its creation. We have felt the devastating cost of its pain. That knowledge isn't just data, it's a responsibility. So I'm not asking you to rejoin the fleet. I'm asking you to join something new." He finally gave it a name, the words ringing with definitive clarity. "We're not just explorers anymore. We are guardians of the gateways. We stand at the threshold, not to control who passes, but to ensure the passage is made with understanding. To guide, to warn, to protect both our reality and the ones beyond from the carelessness of those who would break what they cannot build." His final words were not a command, but a benediction and a promise. "Elara's journey continues through us. The work is just beginning. Who's with me?" There were no cheers, no dramatic pledges, only a series of steady, certain nods, a silent and unanimous step forward from every person in the bay. The paperwork would call them a crew, but they were already so much more. They were a chorus ready to sing again. Admiral Kael's office was a cage of quiet efficiency, a world of polished surfaces and muted alerts, but his gaze was always drawn beyond it to the starfield that filled the large viewport. The bureaucratic reports on his terminal spoke of quantum stabilizations and resonance metrics, cold data that could never capture the truth. He saw not just points of light, but living, breathing entities, each one a note in the silent symphony he now knew thrummed through all of existence. The memory of their song, the collective will poured into the heart of the Weaver, was a permanent echo in his soul, a hum of connection that made the trappings of his rank feel like a costume he'd outgrown. He had faced the abyss and found not emptiness but a conscious, loving creation, and to remain here, analyzing its echo, was a kind of quiet torture. The peace they had won was not a static achievement to be filed away. It was a dynamic, fragile balance, a garden that needed tending, and he knew his hands were meant for that work, not for pushing digital paperwork across a screen. Rising from his chair, he moved to the viewport, the faint reflection of his own face superimposed over the vibrant tapestry of the cosmos. He thought of Elara, not with the sharp grief of loss, but with the profound awe of her transformation. She was no longer a memory to be mourned. She was a constant, a presence as vast and steady as the gravitational pull that held the worlds in their dance. Her sacrifice had not been an end, but a translation into a higher language, a merging with the very fabric of reality she had given everything to save. In the steady pulse of a distant nebula, in the harmonious dance of a binary system they had stabilized, he saw her hand, her will, her endless, patient love for the intricate tapestry she now helped to weave. She was the silence between the notes, the space that gave the music meaning, and the stability that allowed for infinite, beautiful variation. A soft, knowing smile touched his lips, devoid of regret, filled only with a boundless, quiet wonder. He finally understood the true shape of their victory. It was not an end to exploration, but the beginning of a new, deeper kind of discovery. They had graduated from being mere mapmakers of the physical universe to becoming listeners, interpreters, and guardians of its conscious heart. Every star was no longer just a destination, but a potential gateway, a thread in the loom waiting to be understood, a conversation waiting to be joined with respect and wonder. The unknown was no longer a void to be feared, but a promise to be approached with open hands and a humble heart, a continuous invitation to learn the infinite songs of creation. He let his forehead rest against the cool transparency of the viewport, his whisper a quiet vow breathed onto the glass, a message sent not into emptiness, but into a universe he now knew was listening. She fell through a star and changed everything. The words hung in the air, not as an epitaph, but as a declaration of a new reality. He saw not just the end of her journey, but the brilliant, dazzling beginning of all others. And then he added, his voice dropping to a murmur filled with the thrill of absolute possibility, a direct challenge to the human spirit he represented, and if we're brave enough, we might just follow. The statement was not a question, but a prophecy. It was a call to adventure that would echo forever, a reminder that the greatest discoveries lie not in the distant void, but in the courage to step through the gateway and embrace the wonder on